Hey, my name is Eric. I'm coming out with you with another video. Today, yesterday we talked about practice. Now today, I was looking into the idea of genius, what genius is, what creative people and really highly developed and impactful people are. Like, what are some of the characteristics? Are they able to be developed within ourselves? Are they able to be duplicated? Can we take those aspects and use them? That's what I was fascinated with. So I was checking out things in the CU library, and there's a whole section on creativity and genius and thinking and memory. So I was able to put some things together just reading some of those books, taking the most key points, and then synthesizing them together, hopefully in this video. So please like, comment, share. Please add your own stuff. If you find something in your library, I'd love to know it, and I'd love to hear it in the comments. So here we go. So genius, okay? So some geniuses tend to have varying degrees of dyslexia for some reason, just the way that kind of works. It's not so much going here to here to here to here like a linear fashion. It's more like thinking contextually. Now, what does contextually mean? Well, it's where you take different ideas that may have no relationship to each other, but the connections between all these ideas together and the novelty of them put together makes somebody who might be a little dyslexic or on that side or a little bit more likely to produce something unique or creative. Or, this is kind of what some of the great painters or musicians, songwriters, that's kind of their profile. Great songwriters tend to be a little bit dyslexic. Also, if you look at like Richard Branson or a couple billionaires, billionaire entrepreneur people, they also tend to have that element too. It's where it's not so much like flipping letters or whatever. Well, letters and numbers and words are symbols of meaning. So if you don't think in symbols but you think in meanings, and you strap those meanings together, and then you develop the facility in order to manifest them, you got a work of art. Okay, so they tend to be dyslexic. Just a little bit, not too much where it's debilitating. But the thing is then it's kind of like a way of getting outside of the linear way of doing things. Okay, highly developed visual skills. Nikola Tesla, right? Nikola Tesla had a ridiculous amount of visual spatial skills where he could visualize experiments in his head, do them over and over, change the parameters of the machine until he knew that he got it just right, built without a blueprint, like built everything going on his idea, his memory, everything, and it worked perfectly the first time. Visual skills. So visualization, kind of like what we talked about in the practice video, which was before. If you do that, not just visual skills, but also kinesthetic, and you link it with kinesthetic or an audio, you can also have great painters. You can also have great writers, because they'll see all the situations that are going on in the story and be able to pick up all those little details that indicate the feelings, acts, moods of where the story's going, or make that allure, make that fantasy come alive, because they can see it, because they can feel it, because they can just get inside the character. And when you have a good story, a good movie, a good song, you kind of fade out from the world. Like, you're not here, you're not looking straight ahead, you're just, you get enveloped in the song. And the best songs are the ones that you don't know that you're sucked into until you are, right? So that's also another characteristic. So highly developed visual skills or visualization skills. A different definition of terms based on wisdom. So basically they contextualize information together, make it coherent with the world, right? If you have great visualization, right, like Nikola Tesla, well, his visualizations were in perfect harmony and perfect unity with the laws of the universe. And so when he made these inventions in his head, they didn't break, right? They weren't impractical. They actually had some relevancy. So definitions to words. Words are symbols, right? So if you change the definitions, you might get a better answer, right? It'll rain tomorrow, right? Okay, it might. But it has a 60% chance of raining tomorrow. That's a little bit more specific. Okay, then based on what? Well, precipitation and pressure variations. Okay, so it will rain tomorrow if the pressure might be in this gradient with this percentage chance. Now, you're getting closer and closer and closer to a better answer, but the overall concept is it will rain tomorrow. Okay? Right? So you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and more true statements and more true definitions, and you can get to better results that you want that will end up getting you outside of the paradigm of everybody else and make a new field, which a lot of, what we would call geniuses do. They invent new ways of doing things, different models, right? Reason is a model. Reason is a method of getting to truth, right? So if you're thinking differently and you develop a new model to get a different result, you might consider that differing definitions of currently used verbiage or techniques. They tend to be very contemplative in terms of, you could have extroverts, of course, but then there's also this exclusion element where they focus on what they really want and they try to make themselves coherent, right? They're getting rid of, or they're thinking about. It's like a lot of thinking, right? Because once you have an idea, right, all that's stopping you is the ability to manifest it. The various technical stuff, the ability, like if you have an idea of a beautiful piece of art that you want to make, the only thing that's stopping you is time. Time is a measurement, right? So time is a measurement of magnitude. So the only thing that's stopping you is, the ability to manifest it, right? The ability to actually have the skills to draw it on the paper or paint it on the canvas or to play the shit out of any tune you want, right? It's so there's a lot of contemplative, right? You go into a practice room, you go into your studio, and you work things out, right? Your ability to actually bring the idea, and also, you're trying to think of, okay, imagine trying to have an original idea. Well, chances are it's just going to be a whole bunch of experiences that are going to be merged together, blended into a form that is no longer recognizable, and then you put it out with your ability, and it looks like a totally different field, even though it's all your experience blended in together where it's unrecognizable to anybody else. And that's kind of where that element goes. So development in solitude meditation. The next one was they tend to have some sort of mental trauma based on something. I don't know. It's like you have, like, it's always like a tragedy. Like if you look at some of the greatest painters or the greatest artists in history, there's always a tragedy. Like even if it's not like a huge tragedy, there's always something there that involves trauma. Something like that. Now, that might be the cause, or it might just be that what facilitated that creativity and that awesome stuff was not from the trauma, but the reaction to it, right? Not the thing that happened itself, but how they dealt with it, and by developing those systems of how to deal with it, they were able to facilitate the creative arts, the whatever they wanted, and then we recognize them for that creativity and that work and that time, but it might have been just a coping mechanism to deal with the trauma that they were dealing with. Now, imagine if we could take those modalities of working and trying to think of new concepts or blending already known concepts together without the trauma, we'd be in a pretty good spot. We'd be in a great spot. I can't read it. Of course they value creativity. They value seeing. They see it as a standard. So let's talk about creation and destruction. Now I'm not talking about the story. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. So if matter and energy cannot be destroyed, okay, then death and destruction is not to the matter or the energy. It's just to the idea or form of it. So you have an apple. The apple is produced by the tree. It makes an apple, right? Now, then the apple falls on the ground, decays, goes away. The energy within the apple dissipates, goes elsewhere, and the matter goes into the ground and feeds the plants. The matter and energy doesn't change, it's the form. So death or creation of an idea or creation of a piece of art is just the assembly and assembly of material into one unit, and then when it's destroyed, it disperses. Okay? That's what creation and destruction is. It's not a negation of matter, and it's not a negation of the energy that goes into it, because they just go elsewhere when it's destroyed. It releases that, right? Just like an unstable piece of uranium, they just split apart and releases a whole bunch of energy, but that does not negate the energy and does not negate those two particles that are now split. Okay? So it's just a change in form. That's all. That's what creation and destruction is. What's the next one? Most have some knowledge and ability to... Oh, okay. So most of them have an above average IQ, but not too much, right? Because when you have it, IQ really is just a measurement of information, process, output. That's what it's measuring. It's information, process, output. It's basically like a computer. But, you could have a slow computer that does a whole bunch of amazing content and actually puts things together that is great. You don't have to have the fastest computer to make creative content, right? But if you did have a fastest computer, it's no guarantee that creative content or that creative output or anything comes out of it, because you have to have the information, you have to have the process, and you get the result. But the speed in which all those transpire has nothing to do with the actual, the pipe has nothing to do with the flow of content. Okay, nothing to do with it. But it is above average because you have to have some in order to process all the different creative efforts and all that. But it's not. It's literally most people have that. It's just the ability to actualize that and put the content and the work through. Okay. Intense interest in gaining knowledge and wisdom, right? So they're learning about everything, and they're trying to contextualize it together to make what they want happen, right? It's like self-actualization, right? They want self-actualization through the work. It's like, the work is the method to the enlightenment, and the method is also the enlightenment itself. That's basically what they see it. They see it as Albert Einstein when he's coming up with, let's do an actual gene, because you can look at Albert Einstein and really he didn't invent anything, and even though he's the foundation for modern physics, there's a lot of contradictions, meaning that it's probably not accurate. And so, but when you look at Nikola Tesla, who might be a better example, or James Proteus Steinmetz, or Oliver Heaviside, right? They focus on the process or actually doing the thing, or Charles Darwin, the process of doing the thing as the source of the enlightenment, as the source of meaning, as the source of satisfaction. And when you treat your work or whatever you have in your life as the thing that will bring you enlightenment and bring you the greatest things that you could ever have, that it's the intrinsic reward of doing it, it's not going to be based on external causes. It's going to be internal, because all this motivation, all this drive to know more and to be wiser comes from within, right? Because they want to actualize themselves. They want to access that potential that they already were, that you already are. So it's just the actualization and the attachment of value to realizing the potential, to the satisfaction in realizing it, the process. Okay? They were not conformist at all. Now, they learned almost all the techniques of their time. They studied and they grew and they knew more, a huge amount. But then they took things from other areas, contextualized it together to be a total disruptor in the industry. I use that as a joke, but the thing is that they used all the information that they had in all their life experience, and they took that and they made it coherent, and then they changed the realm of science, the realm of art, the realm of music. Okay. I can't read that. Okay. I know it has beliefs. I'm going to say industrious. Industrious beliefs. Yeah, so they just work a lot. Okay. Because work, because it's like practice, right? Like we talked about, right? They're actualizing the capability to actually execute the idea that they have in their head, right? So they're just trying to actualize what they have in their head. Preferences and so they had preferences and individual values for what the work meant, so the meaning behind it. That the work itself was meaningful, not the, well, of course the result was meaningful, but the process had a lot more meaning than if somebody, just was going for a result. Um, so I know it says logic will only take you to the edge, and then intuition will tell you where to go next. But when we look at logic, logic is a method. So the method of the time can only take you so far. And then implied learning, contextualization, right? Intuition is implied learning, right? There's also a section in the CU library that is literally on the other side of the bookshelf that has everything that you need to know, or everything that is kind of available, kind of general, about cognition, about knowledge, about and intuition, which is on the top shelf. And it was basically synthesized as implied learning or implied experience, right? There's two kinds of learning systems, wicked and accurate, right? The accurate one gives you real feedback, like feedback that's, this is the right answer, that was the wrong answer, this is the right answer, that was the wrong answer, right? A wicked one will give you a percent. Oh, you're right about 60% of the time, but how are you going to know in, you have to do hundreds of thousands of trials in order to even get a accurate measurement of that, right? And that's why, if you look at any wicked learning system like poker, you can be a crap player and win, right? Or you could be a great player and lose to a very bad player, and then it causes all sorts of emotions, right? But the thing is that there's a choice that makes money 60% of the time. Now, you'd have to play a lot in order to actually know that, or you'd have to have somebody who's actually gone through it and knows this stuff in order to teach you or whatever. But it's going to be harder to discern what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Okay, so implied learning system. So intuition is only as good as the system that it was learned from. So whatever that means, right? Your intuition is only as good as the system that it was trained with, right? So if you look for good learning systems, and then over time you just begin to have these feelings, right? Subconscious inklings to the right answer. And that's what intuition is. Okay? So these geniuses go with the current methodology or invent their own methodology and then use their intuition to find the next method, find the next way to get to the next result that they wanted. Okay? Next one. They usually learn multiple languages. So a language, the only purpose of a language is to communicate meaning. Okay? I know you can love how a language sounds. How it just fits together. But the thing is like practical use, like without, like nobody's saying random gibberish. They all have meaning behind that, right? And as a tool, as writing stuff, if it was just random letters, then you would have no gauge of how to communicate or how to interact and how to connect with people. So learning multiple languages is multiple ways of being able to convey meaning, right? So they worked on language skills, and they had the capacity, obviously, to do that, or they found some reason to, and they might have lived in Europe for a little bit. So they were very curious. They're always looking for the next thing, the next process, the next way, the next whatever, the next project, the next piece of art, the next method, payoff. Oh, they also use work, because some of them would be so driven that they literally use work as an escape. So you don't really have to use that, right? But they found it as a way of escaping anxiety, right? Because they were able to be themselves when they started painting or started doing music. That was kind of one of the ways. Family. So the only reason why genius can actualize is that there has to be such an investment, right? Imagine, um, genius was never seen in as much as we know, back in the Stone Age. Now, the potentiality for those people to actually be geniuses was there, but the thing is that there wasn't enough funds. Just like a plant has the innate ability to grow to an oak tree, right? A acorn, of course, growing into an oak tree. That doesn't mean that everything else is optimal to actually allow it to grow, right? So the ability and the resources and the kind of the gardening to take care and build and give the plant the ability, right, to actualize itself. That's key. So a lot of the families of geniuses gave them enough resources to actually be successful. Or the resources were found elsewhere, but they were present. They were present to actualize it. Stability. They didn't really care about. They didn't. Nah, I can't remember that. But usually, okay. So this one is very applicable. This probably is one of the most important ones. Is that when they were in a state of euphoria and mania and happiness, they would play. Now, imagine that you have so many competencies to actualize whatever you want, and you're having fun, you're playing around, you're trying things, you're exploring, you're being like a kid again, right? All of you can raise your hand and say, how many of you have been a kid? All of you have been a kid. So they're playing, and then since you're playing, you have so much fun that it's effortless. And since it's effortless, you're not spending energy, right? Whatever, it's not like, it doesn't hurt to expend energy because you want to, because it's it gives you energy back, right? And so it's play, and then it turns into productivity because you're doing all sorts of stuff, and then you're working more because you love it, because it's amazing, and then it's just totally awesome. And then the product at the end of it is beautiful. Beautiful. Like a lot of geniuses, their best art came from when they were in a not manic, when they were in a euphoric state. So if you can just produce at least, neutral, like imagine if you had controlled, your emotions, and you can just choose to be either neutral, where you're focused, determined, or whatever, or in a state of happiness and joy and play, and you're trying things and you're just exploring. How easy would it be? It'd be a lot easier to play cool stuff. It'd be a lot easier to discover things, because when you're really like, I need to discover something, it's not going to work. It's not going to be as good. And that also works for depression. Also destroys creativity. When they go into a depressive state, it tends to stifle creativity. That's the general trend. Now, some works come out of that, but it's kind of like a springboard that gets them into that euphoric state for them to actually make more works. But if we just go with these generalities, then it'll work probably a little bit better. They read a lot of books. So they had a lot of information that they could contextualize together and express in whatever they did. They also did things backwards in different modalities that were unconventional. So if you played a trumpet with your right hand, guess what they'd be doing? They'd be practicing with their left. They'd be doing it upside down. They'd be, some would write with their right hand, and then they'd write with their left hand as well. Or they'd, learn, because knowledge is like a web and memory is like a web. So the more things you connect together, the better your memory and your execution when you go back to the conventional way of doing things. Conventional, whatever that means, but you know what I'm saying. Oh gosh, I just lost it. Oh, there it is. Um, yep. Uh, they usually have an air of grandiosity, right? They feel like what they are and what they're doing is incredibly meaningful, that they have a purpose set by a higher power or whatever you want to call it, but they have so much meaning attached to their life and their work and everything else that they just have this greater sense of self, a greater sense of being, and a greater sense of existing. So, kind of a grandiosity vibe. And if somebody's a genius, they tend to, it wouldn't be that unusual for them to experience qualities that um, would resemble uh, grandiosity or um, various types of superiority or whatever. But that usually comes from the meaning of what they do and the feeling that they're actualizing their highest potential or whatever. So, and then that feels good because you feel elevated, right? Um, yeah, so that's basically some of the different aspects that I was able to piece together from reading just things about academic, some of them are like academic papers where they got a whole bunch of academic professors and they compiled them all together into a book. And so I read some of those books in the library, and it was very enlightening because I used some of those techniques of, okay, getting into a good state, getting into a good happy feeling, and then going out there and making something and really cherishing the idea, cherishing the process, cherishing what it meant. Because if you have meaning, then you have a reason to actually practice, to actualize it, not just for yourself, because that's also meaningful, but also, a lot of these geniuses made things that, turned on the lights. Nikola Tesla made it possible for lights to happen on a decent level for people to live. So, so this was what I found on creative genius. So if we can take some of these qualities, we could have a better potential of doing more with our lives, or at least actualizing what we want. And that freedom is definitely pretty cool. So leave I'd love to hear your comments. Please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. Take care.